Another week, another buddy cop. Lee Wei, the swindling bard, has moved on to Ritter Collar crime, and Fazil is put in a scenario where he's got to decide where his priorities lie. Before the beginning of the pivotal Path Through Fire and War two-parter, we get a chance to really see who Yannick's friends are. So, let's get into it. Lee Wei is living a life of luxury, almost 2 years removed from being at the bottom of the proverbial barrel, living in a tiny room over a sty in Canal Street. Down in Underbridge, he lived in the shadow of Three Hills Grand, connecting bridge that bridges the main castle to its eponymous Third Hills Tower. Now, he's living in the castle, and life is just fine. He's a part owner of a tea shop, the Fifth Watch, and he's got his name on all sorts of important documents. Perfectly legitimate documents, of course. He's got an important scroll to pick up from a new bookshop in town, but no other agenda items for today, because, well, he's been trained to the bone by Eichen von Ortel. His buddy Ike is out in the countryside dealing with some minor issues, so he's heading out of the east wing when he sees people carrying in heavy boxes. Wanting to avoid a chore, he circles around and tries to go through the council chamber, where he overhears the tail end of a conversation between Svez, master of letters, and Fazil, his dear pal and master of the hunt. Fazil has just been filled in on the fact that suspicious happenings involving a dwarvish cartel known as the Court of Stone suggest they are moving into town. Furthermore, there is to be a crackdown soon, and he wants Fazil to surreptitiously keep an eye on Li Wei. He's worried shady figures will make a move on him soon. When Li Wei walks in, the serendipity of the moment transforms into a duo trip to the Fifth Watch for caffeine and snacks before hitting the bookstore. On the way over, they decide to take the rooftops, because why not? Fazil rides his feathered not a velociraptor, Cha-Cha, and Li Wei has his feet. As it turns out, horses don't do tile roofs too well. They run over the roofs, but Cha-Cha takes a slide, and Fazil fails to recover. Li Wei is compelled to cast Featherfall on the two of them to prevent a rough 20-foot fall, and there are local witnesses. He likes to keep his magic a little under the hat as a bard, but sometimes stuff like this just lets slip. The two arrive at an old and respected but recently refurbished and fancied up tea house in Old Town. The walls are brilliant white and girded by a 10-foot tall outer wall. Inside is a tranquil tea house. Li Wei is partial owner alongside the property traditional owner, an urban litter named Amadouin Rofond. Their other business partner is an upstart son of merchants, one Kedrick Broland. Li Wei doesn't handle the particulars, but he does call out to his partners as he arrives, and Amadouin is swift to answer. In short order, they are taken to the upper rooms and shown a fine meal. Not a fan of tea, Fazil enjoys a drink of steeped xanth root. In other words, coffee. Over scones and tea cakes, they are entertained by Amadouin. The conversation is casual until Amadouin begins to steer it towards discussion of affairs at the castle and Yannick Emerald's present situation. He wants to know how the boy is faring in light of his brother being made to take the cloth. Fazil demurs, saying it's a private matter and they can't disclose it. This shuts the conversation down. The other business partner, Ketnick, is out of town on business and expected to be back tomorrow. After finishing up, they roll over to the bookshop. The permission to build for an alchemical distillery in the Harbor District has done wonders for local business, and a less prosperous area of Old Town now sports a brilliant two-story bookstore with bright red walls. They are made of imported timber. Its tile roof is pink, and while the lowest level shows no windows, the second story is absolutely lined with them. It's the sort of place you're supposed to experience from the inside. They park at the nearby horse ties and troughs installed to serve increasingly upscale travelers here to visit the bookstore. Within are tall stacks of books, slender racks of scrolls, and filtering natural lights from the windows above. The upper portion of the store is on a balcony connected to a metal spiral staircase, and behind the desk is Vobar Erdem, the bugbear proprietor of Erdem's elite scriptory, in fine robe and cap. After a quick exchange of words, he hands over the scroll of you-know-what to Li Wei. It has the appearance of divine sheet music, and it's not immediately clear what it is at a glance to Fazil. This is something the player, Matt, and I know, but is being kept a dramatic secret till an appropriate time. Fazil, intrigued in a scroll of his own, puts an order for Fog Cloud. Before the deal is sealed, however, Vobar says this: I tell everyone I do business with, I am at your service, but I am not your servant. I do business with everyone. This will do everything promised, and nothing more. With that, they pop off back through the streets, and not before Vobar establishes that Fazil doesn't speak Yong-Tu, the language of the Eastern Plains that Li Wei knows as well. He then critically informs him he should consider visiting home in the guise of a goodbye in their shared tongue, such that anyone who doesn't know the language would be none the wiser. The two men are heading home when the street becomes strangely desolate and they notice some barrels stacked in alleyways that weren't there when last they came by. Faisal senses an ambush coming on and tells Li Wei to ready up. On either end of the street, four thugs emerge, and they clearly mean business. After a curt exchange, it's clear violence is due. Faisal spots a caster on the roof, tome in one hand and scroll in the other, and points her out to Li Wei, who takes subtle aim, ready to pop his shot when the moment for violence is due. One gag about needing a lighter later, and Faisal is tearing through the rear leader with his sickles. Li Wei's popping his shot, and missing by a mile, and then the scroll in the caster's hands burns up into green nothingness as a rain of acid arrows crashes over him and delivers nearly half his health and damage. What follows is a frantic fight. They flee into the largest nearby house and barricade the door after Faisal drags in and slaughters one of the lead thugs. The enemy run about and try to bash their way in as they ascend through the house, barricading as they go and eventually fleeing out the northern second-story window. There are plunging attacks, feral Faisal Spider-Man action, various ankle rolls along the walls of an outdoor open-air storage unit's walls, and overall a rip-roaring good time of action to go along with this ambush as they flee north to where Li Wei knows he'll be safe, his old haunt, Canal Street. In Canal Street, they run into Bois, Li Wei's trusted right hand. The locals form up to defend against the incursion of outsiders, and Li Wei and Faisal quickly find themselves in a meeting with Aiko. In episode 1, Li Wei stole some dwarvish currency from the shack she was living in. Now, her own criminal enterprises have grown and gotten her in one of the nicest houses on the street. She offers Li Wei a contact with her business associates, the Court of Stone. She introduces him to a dwarf by the name of Ashbeard. It's a backroom deal, and she confirms with Li Wei that Faisal is cool before bringing him down. The connection delivers startling information, makes a simple offer. A raid scheduled for early next week is going to hit a warehouse, where every incriminating piece of paper on Li Wei has been centered. Import of arms and affidavits and guarantees to pass by any inspections in the port of Gatoch will, with this name and seal on them, that have been verifiably used in smuggling and other activities, will be found. Why they've all been moved here does not get elaborated. In return for owing the Court of Stone one blank check favor, Li Wei can have all his problems taken care of. A fire will wash all evidence away. There's some bickering over the danger posed at the harbor and discussion of acid instead. A long talk ensues. But after a go-around, Li Wei steps aside to ask a simple question of Aiko. Are you going to be okay if I say no? She explains she's just trying to help him out, and it's no skin off of her back if he gets them thrown in the castle dungeon, or worse. Knowing this, Li Wei decides to decline and follow his own fate, as Faisal proposes they deal with it themselves. He sighs and hands them a red and white potion, and bids them adieu, as Li Wei and Faisal abscond to the castle. Faisal and Li Wei return to the castle and run into Sigrun. Sigrun, the man who elevated Li Wei to a Ritter and brought him into his new life in the castle after he saved his son's life, is surprisingly jovial and friendly. Clapping him on the back, embracing him even. It's all very friendly. What he's doing as well is telling Fez to kick up the raid to tomorrow night. He has to be navigated around, but they deal and get back to his room and plot. Faisal has his scroll order updated and pays via check, payable to the treasury itself for Insect Swarm instead of Fog Cloud, which he remembered he already has. The group cases the joint and sees the warehouse has a third-story window into an office space that is separate from the main four-story open-air storage zone. They are noticed and made by two guards, but they keep going and avoid further violence. They intend to get in, destroy the papers, and get out. They have to go for a daylight raid because they need Insect Swarm to complete their fire-free file cabinet deletion. Faisal brings forth a fog off the water to mask their advance, passing it off for mist rolling off the bay. They sneak up and cast a rope with a python tied to the far end as an impromptu grappling hook into the opened window. Within they find the papers, and Faisal unleashes the swarm. As they do so, the sounds of violence breaks out downstairs. Someone comes up the rope. It's Kedrick, Li Wei's business partner, apparently also here to take care of business. He's surprised but relieved to see Li Wei is here and satisfied at the good work being done. As the fight grows closer and the insects finish their job, he bids them to descend the rope first, while he stays behind and makes things go, well, to course, of course. After all is said and done, Leeway has a surprise visit in his room from Sigrun, who informs him that he knows of his crimes from when he was a youth, but he's seen that he has lived totally morally uprightly since coming to the keep. He sentences him to guard his son, Yannick, and intimates that he's intending to enkindle Leeway to the flame alongside Yannick when the time is right, functionally making him a co-ruler of the realm. That sets up the start of episode 3 more naturally, and is where we call it for the night. That's it for the Leecap. On to the Reflections. The least planned episode of my most planned campaign to date, the Bard's Tale was always going to be a bit off the beaten track. I talked to Matt about what his character would be doing, spun up some trouble for him to be in, built locations for him to visit, and established hooks to later plot developments. Rosenhead should keep track of the name, the Emerald Heart Society. Matt shared that he felt like he was up and down the whole session, scrambling to keep together his house of cards, and I'm glad I was able to give him that experience. Often characters in a role-playing game feel instantly secured in their position of any gain because it's never challenged. Here, we let actions and their consequences flow logically into a story that felt very Leeway and gave him a chance to bring Fazil in on some under-the-table dealings. I wasn't sure how Greg would run Fazil's reactions to all this, but Fazil came in clutch with Insect Swarm cleanup crews. I think this episode made especially good use of establishing behaviors. We learned how they're traveling before I ambush them, so their personality mounted status is not presumed. Fazil and Leeway are trying to keep everything under wraps, but Fazil pays with a check, and at the end of the episode, the Chamberlain comes by to let him know he's altered the paperwork because, it didn't need to say that you bought a scroll of Insect Swarm from the scroll shop that particular day. Now did it? Too much detail, really. Clutters the paperwork. So, overall, I think we had a great time. I'm looking forward to The Path Through Fire and War, Part 1.